In the shadowed valleys of the Appalachian Hills, an old tale has lingered for generations. It is whispered around campfires, carried on the wind through hollow cabins, and spoken in hushed tones by those who dare recall it. The story is so ancient that time has blurred the line between legend and truth. Some dismiss it as folklore, yet others swear by blood and bone that it truly happened. And whenever the name is spoken, fear passes through the hearts of those who listen. The center of this haunting tale was a man who crossed the boundary of humanity itself. Driven by hunger, by madness, and by a darkness that could not be contained, he committed acts so unspeakable that no one dares to call him by his given name. The people of the mountains, he is remembered only by one title, the cannibal. They say he fed on his own blood, his wife, his children, until nothing remained but the echo of screams swallowed by the hills. And though time has buried the details, the silence of the mountains still carries his shadow, a reminder that some hungers should never be awakened. The story begins in the late 1800s, when the Appalachian Hills were home to scattered cabins and families who fought daily against poverty and isolation. Among them lived a man named Elias Crowther. Elias was a farmer by trade, though the land he worked was little more than a patch of rocky soil. His days were marked by endless struggle, plowing ground that yielded little, tending to animals that often starved before the winter was through, and watching as his family endured the same hardships. He lived in a weathered wooden cabin, hidden deep in the hills. Within its walls were his wife and their 3 children, innocent souls who depended entirely upon his strength and provision. Life in those mountains was harsh, but Elias was a man who bore it with a quiet determination, his family clinging to him as their only anchor in a world that seemed determined to break them. The neighbors, few and far between, often spoke of Elias as a man of stern resolve. He was not known for kindness, nor was he known for cruelty, only for the way hardship had carved lines into his face, leaving behind a mask of cold endurance. His family rarely ventured into the nearest settlement, and when they did, they carried with them the air of people who lived more in silence than in laughter. In that cabin, at the edge of wilderness, the Crothers struggled against the weight of survival. Yet none could have guessed that beneath their quiet lives, a darkness was waiting to rise, one that would turn Elias from a man of toil into something unspeakable. The winter that fell upon the Appalachian Hills was unlike any the Crowther family had faced before. The snow came early, thick and unrelenting, burying the earth beneath a suffocating silence. Days blended into nights of bitter cold, and the winds that swept down from the ridges howled like restless spirits. Inside the cabin, the small store of food dwindled with frightening speed. The root cellar, once lined with jars and sacks, grew emptier with each passing week. The forest, once alive with deer and game, had fallen silent, its trails buried under ice. Traps lay empty, rifles returned unfired. Hunger became a constant companion, gnawing at their bodies, hollowing their faces, stealing away the strength of even the children. The children cried in the night, their small voices weakened by want. Their mother grew pale, her body wasting as she tried to give what little she had to them. And Elias himself, once a man of iron will, began to unravel. His eyes grew darker, his silence heavier, as if the weight of starvation was pressing not only on his body, but on his very soul. It was in that endless cold, when survival seemed impossible, that a shadow deeper than hunger began to stir within him. A shadow that whispered of a way to endure, though it demanded a price no man should ever pay. It began with the smallest of the children. One bitter night, when the fire in the hearth had burned low and the cabin lay in shadows, the boy was gone. No one saw him leave, no tracks marked the snow outside, and no cry had broken the silence. By dawn, he had vanished as though the earth itself had swallowed him whole. Elias told the neighbors that wolves had come in the night, stealing the child away into the woods. He spoke with a heavy voice, his face carved in sorrow, and the villagers, wary of the wilderness, believed his words. Wolves were known to prowl the hills, and such tragedies, though rare, were not unheard of. Yet in the days that followed, something about Elias seemed altered. He no longer appeared gaunt and broken by hunger. Instead, there was a strange vigor in his step, a strength that had not been seen in weeks. His eyes carried a flicker of something that unsettled those who looked too long on. The mother, pale and silent, avoided questions. The remaining children clung to her skirts, their eyes wide, their bodies trembling as if they knew a secret too terrible to speak aloud. Whispers began to stir among the hills, whispers that the wolves were not to blame, that something far darker had taken the boy. And though no one dared say it aloud, suspicion settled like frost on the cabin of Elias Crowther. As the weeks crept on, the Crowther cabin grew quieter and emptier. One by one, the children began to vanish, each disappearance cloaked in the same hollow excuse. Wolves, Elias would say. The wilderness had claimed them. But the neighbors, though distant, began to notice the strangeness. Elias himself no longer looked like a man beaten by starvation. His cheeks, once sunken, seemed fuller. His frame, once weakened by hunger, carried a strength that defied the harsh winter. The look in his eyes grew more unsettling, an unnatural glint, as though some dark hunger inside him had been fed. His wife, frail and sickly, withered before the eyes of those few who saw her. The whispers said she barely spoke at all, her figure reduced to a shadow of the woman she had once been. And then, one morning, she too was gone. Elias claimed she had taken ill and passed in her sleep, that the frozen earth had swallowed her where no one could find her grave. Why now? The neighbors could not ignore the signs. Smoke rose often from the chimney, and a strange, heavy scent carried on the wind when the breeze shifted, a scent no one dared name aloud. Men who passed by swore they saw bones discarded near the tree, lean, small and fragile, not as if by animals. It was clear the wolves were not to blame. A darker truth was taking shape, one more horrifying than anything the mountain folk had ever whispered about. And all of it pointed back to the man alone in that cabin. Elias Crowther. At last, the neighbors could no longer keep away. Too many whispers had spread through the hills, too many strange scents drifting from the Crowther cabin, too many nights when smoke curled thick and heavy against the winter sky. A group of men gathered their courage and went to see for themselves. What they found inside turned the old tale eye. The people barred the door, sealed the windows, and set the structure alight. Flames swallowed the wooden walls, devouring the roof, filling the night with smoke and sparks that rose into the winter sky. Inside, Elias's laughter turned to screams, shrill, inhuman cries that seemed to echo against the mountains long after the fire had burned down. By morning, nothing remained of the cabin but blackened earth and smoldering timbers. Yet the villagers swore that his cries still lingered, carried on the wind, as though his spirit had refused to die with his body. From that night on, the Crowther homestead was abandoned. No one dared build upon its ruins, no one dared cross its shadow. For in those hills, people believed Elias had not perished at all, but wandered still, hungry, restless, and waiting. Long after the fire consumed Elias Crowther and his cabin, the story did not fade. Instead, it rooted itself deep in the Appalachian Hills, passed from one generation to the next as both warning and curse. Travelers whispered of a place the locals called Crowther's Hollow, a stretch of land avoided even in daylight. The ground there was said to be barren, the trees twisted as if scorched by a fire that never fully died. At night, those who wandered too close swore they heard faint cries carried through the wind, mingled with the sound of low, broken laughter. Parents told their children to stay away from the hollow, warning that Elias's spirit still prowled the woods, hungry and waiting. Hunters who vanished in the hills were said to have been taken by him, their bones joining the countless others that once littered his floor. Even the bravest men would not camp near the ruins, for fear of seeing his shadow flickering in the tree lean, or smelling the bitter smoke of a fire that had been extinguished decades before. The name Elias Crowther was erased, never spoken by the families who lived in those mountains. He became only a figure of dread, remembered by a single title, the cannibal. And though time has washed away the details, the story still lingers like a stain. For in those silent, mist-covered hills, some believe the hunger of Elias Crowther was never truly buried.